thanks. So only the strongest made it to the end of the day? Yes. Nice that you're here, and half an hour more and I think we're all free, so please. I hope this presentation will be interesting to you guys. Let me just start a timer right here. Yep. So, Angular 17, what makes this version special? Why is it called the Renaissance? And what does all this mean to us as devs? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daria Barsukova, and in the next 30 minutes, I'm gonna touch upon the key features, in my opinion, that will change the future of Angular development. But before we start, some facts about myself. Again, my name is Daria. I'm a front-end developer at Rabobank. It's one of the largest and the best ones in the Netherlands. And I live in the Netherlands. My hobbies include sewing. I make my own clothes. I think it's kind of like software engineering in a way. I love roller skating, and I travel quite frequently to South America. I'm gonna go there next week, actually. So if you want to chat about that, let me know. And before we start, with a show of hands, who knows what the Renaissance means? Yeah, thanks. So indeed, it's a period in the European history, roughly between centuries 14 and 17. And they marked a profound transformation in culture and society, as well as art. And the term itself is derived from French, and it means revival, rebirth. And before we dive into all the technical stuff, I'd like to tell you a short story about one of my favorite Renaissance artists from Italy, Michelangelo. So he's a key Renaissance artist in many ways, because freed from the medieval constraints, he gathered his inspirations from human nature, from natural nature, from anatomy, and from all things besides the church, which was the case before. And he embodied the Renaissance spirit of individualism and innovation, looking for the new tools and the new inspirations. And why is this important, you may ask? Because I believe that's what the new version of Angular is trying to give us as creators, a new set of tools, a new set of inspirations. However, there was another Renaissance that happened in 2023. And I'm talking about the world tour of Beyoncé. Now, we don't know what the Angular team was inspired by. Who's been to the Beyoncé concert? Yes! It was a good one, wasn't it? Now, going back to Angular. The current version was born in 2016, and it was a successor of Angular.js. And the logo represented the combined shields of HTML5 and CSS. And back in the day, it paved the way for many web developers in their web journey. However, times do change, and so does Angular. So together with the version 17, they completely revamped the whole brand and also the logo to embody the new modern identity, but also the priorities moving forward. Now, who's here heard anything about the version 17? Yeah? Nice. So I hope that today you'll learn a bit more. And when I dived deeper into the topic, because this new version got released not so long ago, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I realized that there are two main themes for me. First one being velocity and performance, and the second one being developer experience, or DevX. And today I'd like to discuss these two themes with you. And for myself, I identified some features that are most remarkable, according to me, and that will really change the future of Angular development. Again, according to me. However, I won't cover all the ins and outs because, well, it's simply a lot. And looking at this huge list of things, and that's not the exhaustive list of all the new features, you might think, how do they come up with these changes? How do these topics come around? Well, the Angular team gathers a lot of data from the annual dev survey, also requests for comments, and user research. And looking at one of these annual developer surveys, you will see some topics that devs identified as strength of the framework. So on the right-hand side, and some weaknesses or opportunities, areas for growth, whatever you name it. And let's zoom in. When I looked into them, I could immediately see how some of them fall under developer experience, such as documentation and component authoring format, and others fall into velocity and performance, such as initial load performance and server-side rendering. Now, how were these addressed in the new version of Angular? Let's take a look. First theme, velocity and performance. Let's start from the very basics, creating a new Angular app. Once you create a new Angular app, you will see that this new version is shifting away from Webpack and now is using ESBuild in combination with Vite. So ESBuild being your bundler and Vite being your dev server. Now, the combination of both promises to increase your ngBuild and ngserve dramatically. And by dramatically, I really mean it. I mean, look at this graph. And these are the speed differences between version 17 and earlier versions. So Webpack versus ESBuild plus Vite. Now, I hope when you try it out for yourself, you're going to feel like Sonic, fast and powerful, because that's the reference I have from my childhood. If you want to try it out now, simply create a new Angular app or change your Angular.json by adjusting your builder and adding ESBuild to it. Now, this change also made possible another change, a new feature, full app hydration. For those of you who is not familiar with the term, full app hydration means a process of restoring server-side rendered application on the client. And this includes DOM nodes, also persisting state and retrieving data, thus avoiding the double work. And how does it translate in your application? You see that in the providers of your main Bootstrap application function, there is provide client hydration. That's it. It handles all the magic, and you don't need to do any manual config. Now, again, you don't need to configure anything. Just try out the new version. When you create a new app, excuse me, water break. Enjoy some nice ASMR. So whenever you start a new app, you will see a prompt. Do you want to enable server-side rendering, SSR, and static site generation, SSG, also known as pre-rendering? Now, if you click yes, it's going to be all covered for you. And if you click no, but wish to add it later on in your project, don't worry, because Angular got you covered. You can simply run ng-add Angular/SSR or ng-update. And do note that this Angular/SSR is a successor of community-based Angular Universal project. They used to take care of SSR. Now, you may think, what are the benefits of these processes? I mean, so many fancy abbreviations, SSR, SSG. Well, first and foremost, faster loading and rendering because your initial bundle size decreases. Also improved search engine optimization because you make it easier for the search engine to index your app. And better accessibility by helping those using older devices or devices with low bandwidth connection. Now, looking forward, what will SSR look like in the future of Angular? There are some topics that the team identified, including progressive hydration and HTTP streaming. Just to give you a brief example what HTTP streaming means. All good. Have a nice evening. It means that if your app has, for example, an audio file, a user doesn't need to wait for the audio file to be fully downloaded to start listening to it. So that's kind of what you experience with Netflix. You don't need to wait for your movie to be downloaded to start watching it. Oops, too fast. What's next? What else can make our apps faster? And the answer is lazy loading. What does it mean? Imagine you have a blog. You have a blog post with your text, your images, videos, and other content. And you might want to have a comment section underneath it. Now, do you want to render the comment section right away? Well, probably not. Maybe you want your user to scroll down and finish your post before showing them the comment section. And that's what we call lazy loading. However, the Angular team calls it deferred use. Let's take a look. So to use this feature, to lazy load some of your content, you can wrap a section of your template in a defer block, which also specifies a loading condition. And it looks something like using JavaScript in your template. And I think it's really cool because it's kind of natural for us to write as developers. But also it's very easy to spot in a HTML file because it's so different from the HTML markup. So it's very readable. Now, the block inside @defer gets rendered later on certain condition. @placeholder block is shown until the defer trigger is met. @loading block shows content while it's loading the deferred part. And @error shows content that you want to show in case your deferring didn't work. How does it work under the hood? Well, in a nutshell, Angular app recognizes content inside of your defer block. It generates dynamic imports, and it manages state switches. Let's see what kind of triggers we can use to leverage the power of these deferred views. There are several triggers, first of them being onIdle, which is a default trigger, and it works whenever your browser enters the idle state and is done doing all the heavy lifting. OnViewport, so whenever this part enters the viewport of your user. OnImmediate, so this is a non-blocking rendering. On specific time frame, on user interaction, on hover, and on your custom-made expression. What I find really cool is that you can mix and match those triggers. Also, you can use this prefetch notation that prefetches dependencies ahead of rendering them, which makes your performance even faster. I also note that we can avoid some flickering behavior. For example, imagine you don't expect your deferred part to take too long, so you probably don't want to show the loading part to your user if it's just, let's say, 2 seconds. You want to avoid the flickering behavior. So you can specify this. Don't show the loading part if it's less than 200 milliseconds. Can't wait to try it. Well, run ng updates. So I hope whenever you try all these new features, it's going to make you feel like this guy from Cars. Again, that's my reference from my childhood. And moving onwards to the next part of the big release, developer experience. How do all these new shiny things make our experience as devs better and easier? Well, starting off, there's arguably nothing more important in the web dev world than community. And looking at this graph made by NPM Trends, let me zoom in. You'll see first that devs really like Christmas. Just look at this funny dance every year around Christmas. And secondly, you can see that Angular is the dark blue line, and it's been consistently one of the most popular and downloaded frameworks. While it cannot really catch up with React, that's in green, you can see that Vue also has grown its popularity in the last 2 years, and now it's more popular than Angular. And I think that's kind of the gap that the new version of Angular is trying to address, to attract both new developers, but also the experienced ones that want to try Angular or switch back to Angular. But how to do it? How to gain the trust and the popularity back? Well, by giving more tools and inspirations. Remember the story of Michelangelo? Well, that's, I think, what's happening here. And again, let's start small with the bread and butter of us as developers. Let's start with creating a component. What will it look like in the new version? Whenever you generate a new component, directive, or pipe, you will see that it comes as standalone by default. What does it look like in practice? You will see that your component is declared as standalone by default, so it's set to true. So there are no more modules, and I think it's pretty nice for new devs especially, because when I was starting, it was one of the most difficult concepts to learn about Angular. Moreover, a very sweet little change. Style URLs no longer require an array of strings. You can simply pass a string if you have just one style sheet. And finally, we have self-closing tag support. Now, in my opinion, the last annoying thing about this is having to import your components twice. First one in your file, and second one in the imports declaration inside the component declaration. Let's see if it changes in the future. But for me, it's the last thing that kind of bugs me as a developer. Anyway, since there are no more modules, what will my app look like? Whenever you start a new app, you'll see something like this. There will be a main.ts file with your main Bootstrap application function, where you provide your root component, app component in this case, and your routing config in your app config. So basically, you could pretty much say, so long ng module. Now, do you remember the defer syntax that I showed you earlier using the at notation? Well, version 17 rewrites completely all the control flow using this syntax. Let's see what it looks like. It's a Svelte-inspired at syntax that's now built in. It means no more having to import your ng4, ngif, ng-switch. It's more ergonomic, which means it's easier to read and write. It introduces new community-requested features, and it produces some performance boost. So something linking to the first theme, velocity and performance. What I find really nice and what I appreciate as a dev is that they conducted a user research to see what developers actually prefer, the at syntax or hashtag syntax. And fair enough, developers prefer at syntax. So what will it look like in practice? Starting with the at for, so the ng4 loops. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I still need to Google sometimes how to write my for loops because, yeah, sometimes I just forget, especially the track by part. I mean, if you don't do it, you can introduce bugs without wanting, and yeah, we don't want that. Well, it will look like this now. I think it's a lot more readable, firstly. Secondly, you don't need a wrapper around it. And thirdly, we have this at empty part, so no more manual writing your things to display if the array is empty. This is all handled. Moreover, note that the track part is still mandatory. However, you can use pseudo variables such as $index to handle this. Now, there's also a new algorithm behind these for loops. And this is a big green table that compares some for loop operations among different frameworks. And let's zoom in. We'll see that the fewer milliseconds it takes, the better, obviously. And Angular is doing pretty well compared to other frameworks. And it's also up to 90% faster compared to previous versions of Angular. Switching gears, at if. Now, this is what it looks like now. Note that the else part needs an ng template wrapper, and this is also something I Google very often, because I will always forget if it's ng template or ng container or whatsoever. Also, we need anchor tag for the else part. What will it look like now? Seems much better to me. And what do we see? Else if. Yay, we didn't have it before in Angular. Finally. I know, crazy, right? What the hell? Also, again, no more imports. You don't need to import your ng-ifs anymore. Finally, switch cases. Now, this is what it looked like previously. Oh, not bad, I would say. Still kind of readable. But that's what it looks like now. Way more concise, way more readable. Again, in my opinion, let me know how you feel. And surprise, surprise, it's now type safe because it wasn't before. Yay, no more bugs. How do you guys feel about the syntax? Because I'm really excited. Not having to Google the ng4 loops anymore kind of drove me crazy. So an extra perk from the team, you don't need to update all your syntax manually because you can just run this automatic migration script and do all the manual labor for you. Don't we love it? I do. Switching gears to reactivity. Any news on that? And for those who don't know what reactivity means, it's basically whenever you have some interaction elements in your web applications, such as, for example, you as a user enter your new task in the to-do list. You don't need to update, reload the full application to see the updates on the screen. It kind of works automatically under the hood. We don't feel it as a user. And that's kind of what we mean by reactivity. Now, how did it used to work before in the previous versions of Angular? Angular used Zone.js library to handle all the reactivity, and it was kind of like a middleware between your app and your browser. It kept calling on the browser APIs to see if there are any events that might have changed the app's state. And then, since there was no context of the event, Angular app checked all the components by default by running the internal algorithms on all the whole component tree, basically. And imagine if you have a huge or a big enterprise app, for example, it can become quite a burden. So for this reason, the new version is moving away from it and introduces a new concept of reactivity named signals. Signals. What the hell is this? Well, there are 3 reactive primitives, and if you're coming from React or Vue, it may sound familiar to you. There is signal, computed, and effect. Let's take a look at each of them. Starting with signal. Signal is a wrapper, it's a value wrapper, and it notifies consumers about changes. It can handle simple primitive types, but also more complex data structures. Next one is computed. It's a deriver. It gets the updated value of a signal whenever a signal is changed. Last but not least, effect. It's a watcher, and it allows to notify consumers about a signal's change by triggering a side effectful function as a result. Moreover, signals will be essential for the future of Angular development, I think. Because I heard that there's this concept of signal-based components that the team is working on. We still don't know the precise details about it, but from what I can see, some things will change. For example, input and output events. This is the example of how we know them nowadays. What may it look like in the future? They may look like this. A bit more concise, a bit more straightforward, in my opinion. Again, this is not available yet. This is still a concept. Now, you may look at all these signals, reactive changes, and ask yourself, why the hell did I spend years of my life learning RxJS? Yeah, thank you. It's a super valid question, but I think that RxJS won't fade away. For those guys who don't know what RxJS is, it's a library that handles reactivity in Angular, and it uses observables as its main reactive concept. Again, from what I think, both handle different use cases. Signals are great for local reactivity and for state, while observables are just excellent with external events, asynchronous operations, and data sources. I think that you can use both alongside each other for even better reactivity, and you can mix and match according to your use case. I find that signals are way easier to learn and have very nice performance, while observables have a rich set of operators for different use cases and are great in complex applications. Now, the last topic that I want to touch upon that relates to DevX is documentation. I don't know if you guys used Angular before, but when I was starting up, but still, when I want to look up something or learn something new, Angular documentations is a pain point for me. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a future home for Angular developers. It's Angular.dev. It's a new website. It's a new place to find your Angular docs. And it's not 100% ready yet, but they have already released it, and you can already check it out. It has all the updated docs, new docs, very nice step-by-step examples, especially if you're just starting or you want to refresh your knowledge. Also nice tutorials, and I think there will be more because now there is still quite a few of them, and a playground environment that's embedded in your browser where you can play with Angular right away. For example, I had some questions about the switch, and I was able to just check it out there without having to work on a proper Angular app. Now, this is not quite yet, as there's a full damn list of the new updates. And this is not the full list, actually. So I can't cover this in my presentation, unfortunately, but feel free to check them out yourself. Some things that I do want to highlight, though, is the dependency injection debugging that became easier with the new Angular.dev tools, because now the tree of injections is visualized and it's easier to debug and to see what's going on in your app. And also View Transitions API. Now, it helps your app to handle your routing and your switching of views in a more beautiful way, in a more user-friendly way, with all these new animations. And this is a nice example by NetBasel. But what do I want you guys to take away after this presentation? Again, in my opinion, I think there are two main themes that will become more and more important as Angular develops in the future. First of them being velocity and performance, and the second one being developer experience. I feel that after some time of stagnation, Angular is back on track, delivering new features with every version, and it's continuing its momentum to do so. And I think it's never been such an exciting time to be an Angular developer. So again, try it for yourself. Try all these new tools. I hope you get inspired. Check it out, create, and enjoy, because it's there for us. Well, thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. And a question back to you. What did you like most about this new version?